Hello, my name is Daniel Cuningham, and I am a horticulturist with Rooted In. And today we wanted to talk to you more about our Go and Grow gardens in a box. Now, if you have any questions, we will have time at the end of this presentations. If you're watching on social media, you can ask in the comments, and somebody will try and get back to you within a few hours or so. But you can connect with us at Rooted in TX on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the social medias, and we'd love to get to know you more there. We also want to give special thanks to our sponsors that helped us develop this program. So all the materials, the designs, some of the resources that we use to get these plants to you at a pretty affordable price. That's the City of Dallas, North Texas Municipal Water District, Tarrant Regional Water District, Upper Trinity Regional Water District, the cities of Round Rock and College Station. We also have several of our city partners that work as a pickup location. So we develop these boxes, we grow them, get them all together, and then we take them to those cities where the city employees volunteer to hand out those boxes. Now, those cities are the city of Arlington, Allen, College Station, Fort Worth, Mansfield, Pilot Point, Garland, and Southlake. And again, we just want to thank all of our sponsors for helping. Our website is rootedin.com. So if you have already purchased your box or pre-ordered, then you're probably already familiar with the website. But if you haven't yet, it's just rootedin.com. And if you visit that website and you see right on the top part, there is the shop feature. You click on that, you go home, and you see two different boxes to choose from. And then you can kind of scroll down, read all the information, all the plants that are incorporated in the class. You can find the designs there, the fact sheet, the maintenance guide, all that again on our website. So we used to work for the state of Texas and do a lot of environmental education and basically just help when it comes to gardening. And throughout those programs, we got a lot of feedback. People had questions about landscape design, or they had questions about plant selection, especially those new to gardening, or those new to native plant gardening, or perhaps those just new to gardening in Texas in general. Like, of course, we have a lot harsher conditions than some of our other neighboring states. People also had questions about maintenance, or some of the plants people absolutely loved, but it was harder for them to find. And so we tried to find a solution to some of those, and it just kind of evolved into an answer of people demanding just tell us what to plant. And so we developed these garden in a box kits where you get 24 plants, these starter plants that are smaller, they're easy to plant, they're inexpensive, but they grow very, very fast. And all of them are not only well adapted to North Texas, our extreme heat, our extreme freezing temperatures, droughts, soil, all the different challenges. These actually are native to this part of Texas, most of them, and some of them are native to parts of Texas that have similar conditions that we have, and they just thrive once you put them in the ground. Now, we'll go over the planning and maintenance guide towards kind of the end of the presentation, and then also each plant gets a fact sheet, and we'll go over those as well. So one of the interesting things about the Go and Grow boxes is those designs that are included with the box are actually plant by number and color. So you get three designs you get to pick from, or you can just use the designs as a guide and kind of design your own thing. But you'll see the spacing is included in that grid-like pattern. Every square represents 1 foot, and you can see the length and the width of each one of those individual beds. beds, then each plant is numbered and colored, and that corresponds to the number and the color of the plant tag or the plant information on that fact sheet rather. So it's all just plug and play. It's easy to design. You don't have to really think too much. And these are all professionally designed by our lead landscape designer who does a lot of high-end residential home landscapes. You've probably seen him on TV, Patrick Dickinson, and these designs are amazing. So again, we have two available this fall. We have the pollinator garden, where all of those plants included are great pollinator supporting species, so attracting hummingbirds and butterflies and our native bees. And then there's also the shade garden. And so for those people with low light conditions, maybe you have a lot of trees on your property, those do a great job of filling that niche and getting rid of the bare soil that's often in the shady spot. So just to go over it again, what do you get for your $85? 24 starter plants in 3-inch pots. They come in those box gardens that are about 2 foot long by a foot wide, so they're easily fit in a car. Sometimes people have concerns there. You get the 3 plant by number layout options, the rectangle, the triangle, and the circle, and we'll go through those as we progress. It covers about 125 square foot area. So if you think about, your landscape, you may have either a smaller area than that. In that case, you can actually put some of the plants in the box over here or some of them over in this bed. You don't have to plant them all in one area. Or let's say you had a 250 square foot area. You could actually buy 2 boxes, and those are designed to be matrix planted. So if you just plant them side by side, they look just as great if you just plant one by itself. The mature height of the plants there are from 1 to 5 feet. Generally, the taller plants are at the back. The smaller plants are up front. They're designed to have the blooms kind of throughout where they contrast as well as the texture of the foliage. Most of the plants in the pollinator box are going to thrive in full sun to part shade. However, the shade box, those are going to thrive more in part shade to dense shade. So it depends on which box you're getting there. You're going to get colorful foliage and blooms from spring, summer, and into fall. Some of these will even bloom a little bit later into winter. And then all of them have evergreen plants, meaning those plants are going to have their foliage even in the colder months over the winter. And then you get an easy to follow planting and maintenance guide. Again, we'll go through that, but it's basically everything you need to know about gardening in Texas to be successful, but it's like the Cliff Notes version. So we don't have really a lot of fluff there, but if you follow those directions, it's really almost impossible not to be successful. Again, because the plants want to grow despite the heat, the drought, the cold temperatures. And another thing, we get a lot of questions of people like, fall, is this the right time to plant? What if it gets a freeze? All these plants are cold hardy to the area, and statistically, folks have more success planting in the fall because we don't have those harsh summer temperatures to deal with, which really is the biggest challenge to growing plants in Texas. All of these are locally grown, all native and well-adapted varieties. We even have some that are local ecotypes. That means their seeds were actually harvested here in North Texas, which really ensures that they thrive and are adapted here. So let's dig into the pollinator-friendly box. You can see the plants there that we've got included to the right in the parentheses. That is the number of those species incorporated in the box. And then you can see many times people have a triangle bed. Maybe it's in between two fences that kind of intersect, or maybe the corner of a driveway and a sidewalk. We also have a rectangular planting. A lot of people have a bed that's this shape. Yours may have some undulation to it on the edge. And so in that case, I would kind of lay it out per this design and then just move it around slightly so it fits in the shape of your bed. But again, these are great guidelines. with that grid-like pattern representing 1 foot. And so you'll see there that plant right there covers in the yellow, the larger yellow, that covers about 3 feet. And so you're planting your plant, you're going to have about 1.5 feet of space on either side. So you don't want to plant them too close together because the plants can outcompete for water and sunlight and nutrients. But if you pay attention to the proper spacing, as those plants grow and fill in, they will have plenty of airflow in the room they need. This is the circular planting. A lot of people like to do a circle, maybe around a small ornamental tree or perhaps just adjacent to your yard. Again, you can also mix 2 boxes. And so if you had kind of a rounder corner of part of your yard, and then you had kind of a longer part, you could do 3 boxes with the round in the middle and then kind of the 2 rectangles going out. Again, you can adapt those boxes to fit your specific landscape needs. Again, each one of these is going to come with a fact sheet. And so this is the pollinator box fact sheet. We've got some pictures, again, all that information we've already gone over. And then if you look at the second page, it just goes through every plant included in that box. And we'll go over some of those now. Greg's Mistflower is probably the #1 pollinator plant that I would recommend for North Central Texas. It's great for butterflies. Usually gets about 2.5, 3 feet tall. Spreads about the same. In fact, it can kind of creep along and form a little bit of a mass planting. Really neat powdery blue flowers that bloom late spring, summer into fall. It is deciduous. What that term deciduous means is those plants are perennial, meaning they're going to live, years, 3 years or more, likely, even a decade or more. But then they are going to die back to the ground in the winter. So there are some plants that are evergreen, meaning they keep their foliage through the winter. There are some plants that are semi-evergreen, meaning in a mild winter, they'll keep their leaves. If we have an outlier, a really cold winter, they may lose some or maybe all. But those deciduous plants, again, doesn't mean they're dead. They just store their nutrients into the root zone, and that's how they avoid the freeze. And then they kind of come back in the spring, usually late February to March there. Pitcher sage is a great native salvia with beautiful powdery blue flowers. This doesn't really do it justice, but it's got big spikes, and when it's fully blooming, those will be full of blooms. It's a little bit a bigger shrub. It gets 3 to 5 feet tall, spreads 2 to 4 feet, blooms primarily in summer and the fall. Again, that's a deciduous plant, but a real interesting plant that's native right here to this region. This is another really kind of an unusual plant, maybe one you don't see as often. The red flame acanthus is more common. This one was just a wild selection. Sometimes you see more pink hues, sometimes you see more orange or yellow, and this just happens to be an orange version of that native plant. Typically, these get 3 to 4 feet wide, blooming spring, summer, and fall, especially as it starts to get warmer. They are deciduous. In a mild winter, they might keep some of their leaves, but mostly they'll lose their leaves. And this one is especially attractive to hummingbirds. In fact, another common name for this plant is hummingbird bush. Now, we also have lower growing plants included in these boxes. This one is lance leaf coreopsis, which typically gets 1 to 2 feet tall. These in your box are going to have primarily yellow blooms, although sometimes you'll see different cultivars with both yellow and red or maroon. Primarily, it blooms heaviest in the spring and the summer, but you can also get some blooms in the fall. These are semi-evergreen, so in a mild winter, if it doesn't get below 20 degrees or so, these will keep their green leaves. This is especially attractive to both butterflies and bees. Wild bergamot, the other name for this one is bee balm, and this is great for not only bees, but also hummingbirds and butterflies. It gets a little bit taller at 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. This is going to bloom all season long. It is deciduous, again, meaning that it will die back to the ground. Now, white mist flower is one of the absolute best pollinator plants. This is usually about a 3 foot by 3 foot shrub, has beautiful white blooms in the fall, and you will just see butterflies completely covering this plant. And this will not only thrive in full sun, but if you have a shady spot and you need a plant, this is a great one too. One of the best fall bloomers is the fall aster. This is a shrub that typically gets about 3 feet tall by 4 feet wide. Again, it blooms in the fall with these beautiful purple blooms with yellow centers. And it is a pollinator magnet, not only good for bees and butterflies, but also hummingbirds. Now, if you're trying to attract butterflies, you've probably heard of the milkweed plant. Well, all the other plants we've talked about typically provide a great nectar source for monarch butterflies. But what is also critical is that their caterpillars have the proper food to eat. And in Texas, we have several different types of milkweeds that they use as a host plant where those caterpillars or those larvae will feed on. The most common and probably their favorite for this area is going to be the green milkweed, Asclepias viridis. It typically gets 1 to 3 feet tall, blooms spring and summer. And now this plant, a lot of people think, oh, this was the only plant that died in my box. We got that a lot. What these do is they're drought avoidant. So as the monarchs come through in the spring, they have the lush foliage that the caterpillars eat. Once it starts to get hot, oftentimes if it's a lot of heat and drought, they will kind of go back into the ground. The top part will die back, but then the next cool spell or wet weather, it kind of jumps back up again. So even in a pot at our nursery, we often see that, people want to throw them away and they think, oh, this plant's dead, but they have a really extensive root system and it's very rare for them to just die completely and not come back, especially once they're established. Purple skullcap is another great low-growing plant at about a foot tall, maybe 18 inches wide or so. This one's going to bloom all season long, and it has evergreen to semi-evergreen foliage. So most years it's actually going to keep that green foliage throughout. I've even seen this in my own landscape blooming later into the winter, which is very interesting. Augusta Dulberg sage is the cousin to Henry Dulberg sage. And if you haven't learned the story about this plant, it's really intriguing, but this was grown on Augusta Dulberg's grave. The blue version, Henry Dulberg, was growing on her husband's grave, and famed plantsman Greg Grant found this growing outside of LaGrange, Texas, harvested those plants, and now Henry Dulberg is an industry standard, really grown coast to coast. But Augusta Dulberg is a really interesting plant you don't always see as often, and so that's why we've included it here. It is fantastic for native bumblebees. In fact, I don't think there's a plant that they like better, and also many of our butterflies are attracted to those as well. So the second box we have available now is the shade garden. We'll go ahead and quickly dig through those plants. You can see them on the screen. We've got some unique ones and kind of the breakdown of how many is included in each box. Again, we have the 16-foot triangle design. We also have a 13-foot circle design, and then that rectangle design as well. Again, all of those are thoughtfully designed with the spacing, the numbers, and the letters that correspond with your plant tags in your box, so it's very easy to follow. A great shade-tolerant shrub that we've included in the box is the American beautyberry, where traditionally in the wild you'll see the more magenta purple berries. This is a native. Again, it's a wild selection that has white berries. So we've tried to include some unique plants in here for just everybody, even the experienced gardener might find something unique. Typically, these bloom in the summer and they're very attractive to small little bees and pollinators. They are deciduous, so they'll lose their leaves. In summer and fall, they'll start to produce those berries, and those berries can persist through the winter, where typically they are going to provide food for songbirds in the early spring. Now, another unique plant we have is the pink Turk's cap, where traditionally you'll find Turk's cap in red, pink, and white are also available. And so this has a little bit more delicate flower. It's got a little bit smaller stature. It's a little bit less aggressive than the red Turk's cap. Again, the flower color is pink. There's a few little typos I need to fix in this. But typically it's going to bloom spring, summer, and fall. Then it does die back to the ground in the winter, but is a great little native hibiscus for low light conditions. Now, we've also included a grass and some sedges in this kit. And grasses are neat because not only do they offer contrast in texture as well as movement throughout the landscape, contrast in the form. It makes each plant pop, especially those broad leaf plants or those flowering plants to have the accent of a grass. This typically gets about 3 foot tall, spreads 2 feet, and even greater than that if it can reseed. But it does have those oat-like seed heads that kind of fade to brown, bronze, and tan through the winter, and they really add interest even though they do fade and die back to the ground. The leaves themselves look pretty December into January, maybe February. And when they start looking a little beat up in February is usually the time we cut them back and then allow them to regrow. So we consider these semi-evergreen because they really do look great about 11 months out of the year. The next plant we have is a great shade bloomer. This will thrive in even the densest shade conditions. Usually it gets about 18 inches tall, spreads a foot or so with these red blooms from spring to summer. But again, cedar sage naturally grows underneath cedar trees, and so it is very well adapted to low light conditions. We've also included that Texas sedge. And just before anybody says anything, many times people think that this looks like the grass goat burrs, or Centris incertus is the scientific name. This is not. Those are not sticker burrs on the top of those. They're very small little seed heads. This is a soft grass. It makes a great lawn alternative. It only gets about a foot tall and wide in these little clumps. And this one is evergreen in most winters. So again, you just get something to look at even in those cooler months. But again, it offers a little bit of contrast in texture and form and a little bit of movement as it kind of blows in the wind. Now, we've also included a native fern in this box that's native right here to north central Texas. This gets about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. Because it's a fern, it's not really planted for its bloom, but that lush, beautiful foliage. Again, this one is semi-evergreen, so in a mild winter, the leaves may persist a little bit longer, and this thrives in the lowest light conditions. So if you have that bare soil, it's a great alternative. This one is the wood violet. It's a great native ground cover that primarily blooms in the spring, usually gets a foot to a foot and a half tall and wide. Beautiful purple blooms, a relative of the pansy. And like the pansy, the blooms are also edible. I know that's probably not something most people are going to do, but they've got a nice little citrus flavor to them. And these are ground cover, so they'll kind of spread and again take up the real estate in the spots that may be bare and nothing seems to grow in those low light conditions. We also have another sedge that's native to central Texas, and this one is a little bit more of a spreader. It grows very similarly to Texas sedge. Sometimes it can be a little bit bigger. Again, it's semi-evergreen to evergreen and thrives in those low light conditions. Now you can see here that planning and maintenance guide. Again, you can download that now if you want to learn more. A lot of people want to see the information on the planting before they actually put plants in the ground. And there's some great tips on actually how to plant and take care of the garden in the first few weeks. And we'll go ahead and get into that right now. We'll start off with how to pick the right spot. So you want to make sure that you're putting the right plants in the right place, like any addition to the garden. Unfortunately, people tend to overwater, over fertilize, over apply pesticides. Not only is that detrimental to plants, statistically, more plants die from overwatering than underwatering. But if you're fertilizing real heavy, not only can that stress a plant, but perhaps make it more susceptible to pest and disease. And then if you aren't putting any synthetic, fertilizers or pesticides out, there is the potential for those to run off your landscape down the nearest storm drain. A lot of people don't realize that those storm drains feed in typically to your local creek, and that ends up in a river or a lake where we get our water from. And so we just make sure if we are using those products, we're applying per label instructions. Most of the plants included in these boxes are so resilient and well adapted, they don't need a lot of those inputs. And the bonus is not only do these plants look pretty, they all look amazing, especially in combination, but they provide natural resources for our wildlife. Even the shade box, you'll see some pollinators there. Now, how do you select the proper location? Well, I want to kind of go through the sunlight. What does it mean when it says part sun or part shade or full shade? So in the spring, we do an edible box and a box that is Texas native plants. So those are just branded a little bit differently. In the fall, we have the shade box, which is designed again to thrive in part shade to full shade. And the pollinator box is designed to thrive in full sun to part sun conditions. And again, we'll go more into that now. So a lot of people don't realize that because we're in the northern hemisphere, the sun's path is always going to provide more sunlight to the southern exposure of not only our home, but fences and trees. On the opposite there, that means because the sun is kind of always going to be on this side of 12 o'clock, then the north side is typically going to be the most shaded. So the north side of your home, especially kind of 2 to 3 feet out and right in the middle, sometimes there's a little morning sunlight that comes on the east northeast side, and sometimes there's a little bit of afternoon sun that comes kind of on the west northwest side. But right there in the middle north, that is the shadiest spot. And it's real hard for sunlight to penetrate a brick home. Although maybe if it's the north side of a tree, you could get a little bit of sunlight through there. The west side is typically going to be the hottest side, the most sunlight, most intense sunlight. The east side is typically going to be that morning sunlight that's really gentle. And so kind of think about that. Our pollinator box will thrive on the west side, the south side, the east side, as long as it gets part sun conditions. And then the shade box is probably better underneath a tree on the northeastern exposure where there's more shade. The other thing to think about is the sun's path actually changes. In the summer, it sits more overhead. In the winter, it'll be further kind of deep in the southern sky. And then in the spring and the fall, it's more at that midpoint. So you have areas in your landscape that may be in full shade for spring and fall and winter, but in the summer, they kind of get more sunlight. So pay attention to that. And actually, with your plantings, you can help alleviate some of those challenges. But one of the key things is really just planting them in the right sunlight conditions. I'll tell you the box that I planted, we shot a video and planted the box, one of the leftover boxes this spring. And I watered it in, probably twice in the first week. And then we went on vacation and I may have watered it 4 or 5 times this summer, if that. And like the Zexminia went from something that was 6, 8 inches to now it's 2 feet wide. Most of the plants are almost fully grown at this point, and we just composted, we mulched, we watered a few times, and even with the harsh summer, the plants really thrive. That's how easy it is. So pick and one of your designs, which one that fits best with your needs. Once you've selected the right location, I typically am going to grab a tape measure. You could grab a few wooden stakes, maybe some string if you wanted your lines to be perfect. If you want more of a meander, garden hose is a great tool because then you can kind of change the shape as you move the hose, and that can be your line that you use for your edge. A shovel or a hand trowel. If you've already got a bed, hand trowel works great for planting these smaller plants. If you have a new bed and maybe you want to incorporate some compost, a spade fork or a tiller or an option. You don't have to do that. Some people like to. Would also encourage you to make sure you have access to water before you put plants in the ground. So maybe simply just having a hose and a faucet nearby where you can stretch and water, or you want to install drip irrigation, or you want to kind of change your existing irrigation system. But make sure you do have a way to water those before you put them in the ground. Even though they don't need much water, it really is going to help during establishment. I do like to incorporate compost, especially for those of us that live in areas with heavy clay soil. It's one of the best things to do to break up those heavy clays. But if you do have sandy soil, it's also wonderful for improving the qualities of that sand too. A lot of people think of compost as a fertilizer, and that's not really true. It does have a lot of macro and micronutrients. It also has that organic matter that works like a sponge. Not only will it infiltrate more water when we get rains, more of the water will actually go in the plant's root zone, but then it holds on to that water like a sponge. And so there's access to that moisture for a longer period in the plant's root zone. For newly planted beds, I typically will incorporate 1 to 2 inches of compost into the top 3 to 6 inches of soil. That's just kind of a good mix and it allows a little bit of that to break down initially. Um, if you already have an existing landscape beds, maybe just sprinkle a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch of compost on the top after you've planted your plants, and then before you put the mulch on top. So compost is nice in that in between. Like if the soil is the one layer of the bread and the mulch is the other layer, the compost is kind of that meat in the middle of the sandwich. Um, you can buy high quality compost. Most local nurseries are going to have the best. If you are, located in an area where the box store is really the most affordable, the closest option, I would look for mushroom compost. What you don't want, feel the bag, you don't want a bunch of wood chips in there. And unfortunately, there's a lot of brands, again, mostly they're at the big box store where they're just trying to rush the product and it's not completely broken down. So that mushroom compost is nice because it's made with straw and manure and it breaks down really, really well. You can also buy compost by bulk. So if you just type into your favorite web browser bulk compost, traditionally that's going to be about 1/3 of the price. If you have them come and deliver a big load of it to your house, if you need that much. But the negative there is then you have to shovel it in a wheelbarrow and then go put it in place. Where the bags are kind of easier to carry and typically goes quicker. So you have some choices there. Now, there is some misinformation that kind of goes around online, not surprising when it comes to plants. But we really recommend that you plant your Go and Grow plants within 1 to 4 days of receiving them. Some people think that you need to plant them in a larger pot and kind of grow those. People are afraid to put them in the ground, again, with winter a few months away. But really, again, these plants are adapted to the freezing temperatures. There's really no plants included in these boxes that you would have to worry about. And so as long as you plant them, you compost, you mulch, you water them in, they will be fully ready to go by the time we get freezing temperatures. Now, also on your plant spacing, make sure that you lay it out. You can kind of do a rough layout first. Just basically, you can actually measure, or you can just guesstimate. So usually, what I do, when I'm doing a go and grow box, is I'll measure out that 25 feet, and then I will lay out the what plants are designed in the middle, and then I'll fill in the other. If that makes sense, then I know, oh, that's the halfway point. Now I can do the halfway point again, the halfway point again, and spread them out. You can also put that tape measure out. Some people are like, it's got to be exactly, 36 inches space between this plant and this plant. I get it. But for me, if it's 34 inches and this one's 37, it's more natural design. But you can do that however you like. But just make sure, some people will just cram plant because they're small right now and put it a foot away from each other. But again, if you follow the designs, you'll see, oh, this plant can get 3 feet wide. So if these were a foot apart and they get 3 feet wide, those plants would be growing in together and again, out competing each other for water, sunlight, nutrients. If you do have a space that's smaller than one of the designs, then just put half of the design or three-fourths the design, and maybe take the other plants you didn't use and put them on another spot, just so it kind of balances out that part of the landscape or carries over some of those plants somewhere else. Proper planting. So again, you want to kind of space it out. You can also make adjustments after you have it laid out. Oh, I like this better here. I like this better here. A few inches in either direction, even a foot in either direction, should just be fine, especially if your space is a little bit different. You want to make sure that you're not planting too deep. That's probably the most common mistake when it comes to planting, especially in our heavy clays. When we get a lot of rain, plants planted too deep kind of tend to rot out. They essentially drown because there's too much water, not enough oxygen. If you plant a plant too high, which shouldn't be a problem with these plants, then the roots that are exposed to the air slough off and die back. But you want to plant it right at that soil line that it comes in. So if you look at your pot, you'll notice that that potting soil in there is slightly above the edge of the container. So you want where that soil is to be right at the same level as the soil around. Also, could be potentially a little bit higher. You don't want to go too high, but if you plant it slightly higher, like a quarter inch, half inch, then a lot of times it settles right at that soil line. Planting tips: when you're removing the plant from the container, just gently squeeze the base of the plant. Sometimes the roots are really firm in there, and so you just kind of jiggle it. You don't want to just yank on the stem, but usually I'll lay it on the side and just wiggle until it comes out. You don't have to be too ginger with the plants, but don't just yank it by the stem. Once your plant's in the hole, just backfill with the native soil. You don't need to put compost actually in the hole. In fact, most of the time it's actually better to put the native soil in there. And then water each plant thoroughly to a depth of about 6 to 8 inches. So usually it's a half an inch, three-fourths of an inch of water. Water it in real good to make sure the bottom of that plant is saturated in that whole area. So that just helps them get a jump start. Over the life, once they're established, they won't need a lot of water, but make sure you water it in after planting. Typically, you're going to put 2 to 4 inches of mulch, but you don't want to pile mulch around the base of a plant. If we look at the right side, the mulch should be a little bit tapered off so it's thicker on the outside, but you don't want a lot piled up around the base of each plant. Now, if you do mulch, not only is it going to suppress weeds, and again, those weeds compete with our plants for water, sunlight, nutrients, it's going to help keep the soil temperatures cool in the summer and warmer in the winter. And then it also helps retain moisture in addition to allowing more of the water drops infiltrating the soil when we get a rain event or maybe just when you're watering. They are going to require a little bit more frequent watering during establishment. So after you water it in heavily initially, I would check on it every 3 to 4 days at least. Now, that's if you've compost and mulch significantly. If it's a thinner layer, maybe you want to check it more frequently. If it's really hot and dry, then check it every other day. If you look out there in the morning and the plants look wilted, that's a good sign that they need a little bit of a drink. But one of the best things is just sticking your finger in the soil around the plant. And if it's wet, you're probably okay. You can hold off on watering. But if the top 2 inches is dry, then I would consider adding a little moisture there. But you don't want to just water it twice a day, every day, no matter what, or you will have some plants that tend to struggle. After those plants are established, and that may be 3 to 6 weeks, it may be a couple months. Generally speaking, it's gonna happen sooner than later if we're having cooler temperatures and ample moisture. You're still gonna need to water, but you really probably aren't going to need to water much this fall, especially if truly we keep looking at the forecast and experiencing, fairly low temperatures for this time of year. Uh, but primarily, over the winter, November, December, January, only a little bit of water. We recommend maybe an inch of water a month for most of our perennials. You can use drip irrigation systems. You can use hosing, sprinklers. If it's raining inch a month over the winter, then you don't have to water at all. Again, in the fall, if it's raining every week or so, that's really going to minimize how much you have to water. If you are confused on how much to water and you're not satisfied with the finger test sticking in the dirt there's a great resource that's called Water is Awesome. We developed, helped with some of the videos, then different guides, gardening guides for that program, but really has great information on gardening. But the foundation is, how can we use the right amount of water? We don't want to use too much water. Again, that raises our water bill, but also it can be detrimental to the plants. We don't want to absolutely never water at all, because newly planted plants do need a little bit of water to get established. So Water is Awesome has a couple different resources that you can sign up for. They'll give you either a weekly email or a text message, and they'll tell you how much to water. Now, it is for turf grass, and typically most of our native plants are going to use a lot less water for turf grass. But the way I use that tool is I don't turn on my sprinkler system unless Water is Awesome sends me a notification. They use local weather station data. They look at transpiration or the water that's evaporating, and then you'll just replenish that water in the soil when it's needed. So if it's really hot and windy, you probably have to water a little bit more and more frequently. So if it says that I need to water my lawn about a half an inch, then I'll probably water my native plants a quarter of an inch, or I may just spread out the times that I'm watering. So if it says to water my turf grass a half an inch for a week, then I may go 2 weeks to deliver that half an inch to my native plant. So again, the native plants are going to use a lot less water than your lawn, but if you're really confused with how to water, especially when you're establishing that plant, that resource is a great guide. Again, that's waterisawesome.com. Again, if you're interested in purchasing a box, no pressure at all. You can find all the information we've talked about today on our website, rootedin.com. You just go to rootedin.com/shop, go to the pollinator box, go to the shade box. You can kind of go down the screen there. The product details, the plants, how to get growing, all the different pickup locations that are available. If you click on the add to cart, there, it will bring that up, and then you just go to checkout whenever you're ready. Maybe you want to buy a few boxes or a moisture meter. You just fill out your name. Make sure you get the email right. Some people don't get their email right, and then it's hard to communicate. But there's the drop down menu with the pickup locations. There's 8 all around Texas. And then you can enter in your credit card information, this place your order, and then all you have to do is drive through and pick up your box. It is Saturday, September 28th. We're going to cut off the purchase on the boxes September 20th, unless they sell out before then. It looks like the shade boxes probably will sell out before then. Not quite sure if the pollinator boxes will yet, but so you have plenty of time to pre-order your boxes, and then you drive through and pick it up again Saturday, September 28th from 9 to 12. If you order for Garland pickup, you have to pick up in Garland. You can't just, pick up in Southlake because you're in that area. The set number of boxes are delivered the day before. And again, those city volunteers are there to pass out the boxes from 9 to 12. So if you show up at 1, those people are volunteering their time, and they've already gone home by there. So if you're pick Pilot Point as the pickup location, that's where we own a retail nursery, and there's a little bit more flexibility there if something you forget, but there's really not any wiggle room, unfortunately, with the other locations if you don't pick up from 9 to 12. I will tell you, if you do forget to pick up, or if you're out of town, it's great to have a friend or a neighbor. You could even, buy them a box and say, hey, if you go pick up a box, you can have one on me. Or another thing you might want to do is if you can't come pick it up, we donate them to a local community garden. So that may be something to consider. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask those in the comments now. I did have some questions here that we often get frequently, and just wanted to kind of go over those. A lot of questions we get: can I plant them now? What about a freeze? Yeah, fall is actually statistically the best time to plant plants in Texas. In fact, I don't know of any horticulturists or gardening experts that would say otherwise. Facebook gardening groups and places where there's not as accurate information, people believe that spring is the best time to plant. But again, if you're planting the right plants that are cold hardy to our area, you don't have to worry about the winter. And in fact, in most years, if it's not a storm Uri, in some plants, go and grow plants, vast majority of them survive Uri. But in a mild winter or an average winter, there's absolutely no problem at all. But what we do know is in an average summer, that is extremely hard to baby plants through, new plants. So if you plant in the spring, that's great, especially early in the spring where they have a few months to establish before it gets hot. But if you plant later in the spring, temperatures 90, 100 degrees, that means you're going to have to water more frequently. You don't have to deal with that in the fall because we have cooler temperatures, we have more rainfall, and fall is the biggest distance between us and 100-degree temperatures, and that's why it's the best time to plant. Do I need to pot them up to a larger size? No, I mentioned that before, but the plants are actually more resilient in the ground than they are in a pot. In the ground, they require less frequent watering. They're more heat tolerant. They're more drought tolerant. They're more cold tolerant in the soil itself. How long can I leave them in this container? Again, we recommend planting between 1 and 4 days. You could keep them in the container for several weeks if you'd like. Again, we discourage people to do that because you have to water them at least once a day, maybe twice a day when they're in that small container, because it evaporates more. The root systems can't grow out and tap into the soil moisture deeper in the profile. So really in the ground is the best. Uh, do all the plants come back each year? They absolutely do. So you'll notice on the fact sheet, they're all listed as perennial. And again, perennial just means that a plant lives 3 years or more. Most of these are going to last a decade or longer than that. So that's what that refers to. Annual, those plants, and again, none of those are included in the box. Those plants just live 1 year and they finish their life cycle. So again, these plants are perennial. They'll live a long time. How long does it take them to fill in? It really depends on the plant. I will tell you that Zexminia, it grew, almost full size in just a few months. Some plants may take a little bit longer, but I would expect them to be mostly full size within the first 16, 18 months or so. And then in that second, third year, they'll continue to grow and thrive and fill out. What if my bed or space is bigger or smaller than the designs? Again, the designs are based on 125 square feet planting. So if you only had about 100 square foot area, what I would do is kind of mix the plants in based on that spacing. And then the extra plants, just go fill those in pockets throughout. You can give them to a friend or a neighbor, family member. People absolutely love plants, especially plants that attract butterflies. The other thing that you can do if you have a larger space, again, is to buy a couple of boxes and then you can repeat those designs or put them in a combination. You could do a rectangle design over here and then a triangle design on this side of your yard to kind of balance it out, or whatever you would like. The fact sheet has the size and spacing of each plant, so you can use that as a guide, even if you choose not to follow those designs. Many people say, I have a black thumb or I've failed so many times at gardening. This is really why we designed these boxes. People new to Texas, people new to gardening, even just every gardener that has gardened in the past, 3 summers in Texas. We're record-breaking heat and drought. And so we've had really extreme freezes. We've had really extreme drought. We've had really extreme heat in the summer. And I would just get used to that. Expect more of the same. If you plant the weak plants that unfortunately a lot of times you see at the box stores or kind of the larger chain nurseries, they're not plants that are adapted to Texas. They're plants that they do well in Georgia, or they may do well in California or New Hampshire or somewhere, Florida. But we need to put plants that are heat tolerant, drought tolerant, cold tolerant, and tolerant of our soils. And as former plant researchers for the state, that's really our bread and butter. And we only put plants that you can be successful growing, probably the most easy plants to grow. Also, if you lose a plant, and sometimes it happens, I would say we have about a 90% success rate, in terms of people, vast majority of their plants are successful. But let's say you have a few die. We've also included plants that will continue to grow and fill in those bald spots. So Turk's Cap, Zexminia, Inland Sea Oats, the Cedar Sage, Augusta Dulberg, the Rock Rose. There's lots of plants included that will continue to spread if something dies. So native plants in the wild kind of have a little bit of an ebb and flow. So this is more of a meadow or a prairie garden or a cottage garden where we try to add some formality to it with the layering and choosing the right plants. And you can make it more formal if you do maybe once or twice a year pruning, but you don't have to do that. Those plants are going to fill in no matter what. What if I can't pick them up on the day or the time? Again, I would ask a friend to do that, maybe a family member, bribe them with free plants if you have to. Again, the plants that don't get picked up, we try our best to make sure that if you bought a box, we want to do our best to get it in your hand. Sometimes the logistics just aren't there. I can't go, drive to South Lake and get the boxes and deliver, this one at the College Station. There's 8 pickup locations. It's just not feasible for me to do. And again, maybe if you showed up at 12:15 or 12:30, the city employees would be there, but they're only committed to be there, again, volunteers from 9 to 12. So try and pick it up during that time if at all possible. Can you buy single plants? That's a question we get a lot. You can only pick them up at the pilot point location. So again, we just deliver those pre-made boxes enough for people to pick up that has reserved, because these locations aren't nurseries. They're most of the time organizations, buildings, cities, municipalities, what have you, different garden groups. And so if you want to pick them up, just buy one plant. The leftovers we typically will have the next week at our nursery in Pilot Point, but you can't just go to Garland and get one, or South Lake or Mansfield. It'll only be at that Pilot Point location, and that's not guaranteed. If we run out of plants, we only put the highest quality plants. Even though we order more and we grow more, we only put the highest quality plants in the box. So if they don't look good, then we're not going to sell them to you. So that is all that I have on the presentation today. Again, if you have another question, please ask it in the comments. This presentation is recorded, so you may be watching it on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or wherever we posted it. And so if you've asked questions and nobody's answered them yet, just wait a little bit and come back and check. And I promise I'll go through everyone and get those answered, or one of my colleagues will. Again, if you have a specific question, feel free to reach out. I'm TX Plant Guy on social media. Our work page, Rooted In, is Rooted In TX. And so you can ask your question there if you want to get a more immediate response. Most of the information, if not all of after hours, go there. And again, we want to thank everybody for joining us, and we hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Happy gardening.